I asked the kid I was babysitting, "What do you think lives out there in the forest?" He replied, "My mother." I had been babysitting all summer to make some extra cash. Initially, I asked around at school if anyone needed a babysitter for their siblings or knew someone who did. I started with kids from families I knew, but eventually I needed more work. So I put up an ad on Craigslist. Before long, I received a response. The family lived in the suburbs, but what unsettled me was how close their house was to the woods and the fact that they had no neighbors. I felt a bit freaked out at first, considering that they were strangers with a cabin in the woods, but I decided to push through my fear for the money. The house was a cozy little cabin, clean with a nice garden in the back that led to a trail in the woods. They had lanterns hanging in the garden and a swing at the far end. The living room featured a large window facing the forest, which bathed the room in sunlight during the day. The kitchen was adjacent, with its counter facing another big window, surrounded by pots and vines with silly signs like "Home is where the family is" or "In this house, we say sorry." Upstairs, there were only 2 bedrooms. The attic was a tiny space and its window also faced the woods. The kid was pretty quiet. I neither liked nor disliked him. He just didn't stand out. He seemed to be around 5 or 6 years old, so I would put him to bed quickly and then snoop around the house. I've always been curious about whoever hired me, even though I know it's not exactly recommended. I would go through people's stuff whenever I felt bored. Around midnight, I slowly pulled out one of the drawers in the main bedroom. It was filled with various trinkets, coins, notebooks, pins, and buttons. This family liked to collect useless stuff, and I enjoyed exploring it. While studying a little ceramic horse statue, I noticed something strange. A huge shadow covered it and seemed to dance across the porcelain. Looking around, I realized the shadow filled half the room. I couldn't make out the silhouette or what could have cast it. The unexpectedness of it made fear creep in, freezing me. Someone was at the window. I knew it could have been a bird. That was the rational explanation. But I hesitated to look up. What if it wasn't a bird? I stood still for what felt like an eternity until the shadow passed, and the moonlight illuminated the horse again. I breathed a sigh of relief and slipped the horse into my pocket. Unbeknownst to me, that would be my first contact with it. Something compelled me to stop snooping and head downstairs. I turned on the TV and curled up on the couch. At one point during the night, I heard creaking upstairs. I know it shouldn't have freaked me out so much, but I was still terrified, so I went to check it out. The house was dark and quiet, and the 2 bedrooms facing each other were empty. Empty. Where did the kid go? "Jason," I called, my voice piercing the silence, making me feel like an intruder disrupting the night. "Jason, where did you go?" I felt as if someone was watching me, and I turned to fixate on the attic door, which was now open. My instincts screamed at me to leave, but my head refused to let go. What if there was an intruder? What if he had taken Jason? If I had just looked up at the window when the shadow passed, I would know what I was dealing with, if I had the courage to face it. My voice sounded weaker than before, but I had to try again. "Jason?" "Yeah," came the almost immediate response from the attic. Odd. What was he doing up there? I took a step onto the first stair. "What are you doing up here? It's really late. Your parents are going to be home soon." As I climbed step after step, I tried to adjust my eyes to the darkness. The attic was much darker than the rest of the house, but I could make out a ray of light tracing a tiny silhouette. "Jason, are you here? What are you doing? You're freaking me out." I finally reached him and placed my hands on his tiny shoulders, but he didn't respond. He was just staring out the tiny window into the woods. "What's going on?" I asked. "What are you looking at?" I sat next to him and stared out the window at the woods. A patch of grass began at the house, pierced by trees. The further you went, the denser the trees became until you were completely surrounded by the forest. You couldn't even see the sky from how tightly the branches closed around you. The woods seemed to swallow the horizon like a dark mass blending with the sky. There stood Jason, just staring. "What do you think lurks out there?" I asked playfully. "In the woods?" he replied. "Yeah, my mom." I blinked a few times. That was unsettling. Kids say weird stuff, but why would he respond like that? Was that a "your mom" joke? Was he trying to be funny? "What do you mean? What does a lurk mean?" "Oh, lurk means when you wait or move slowly in the darkness because you don't want to be seen." "So, like hiding?" "Yeah, but you're lurking when you also want to do something bad, just like how animals lurk before they attack or monsters," I added, trying to scare him. "So, what do you think lurks out there in the forest?" "My mother," he responded again. My body tensed up. "That's not funny. I don't want to be funny." "Why would you say that? Your mom? That's an old joke and it stopped being funny a while ago." "I'm not joking." "Okay, let's go to sleep. Your mother can't be lurking out there. I saw her and she's pretty nice. I don't know what she told you, but she doesn't eat people. She's not with your dad now, and they're going to come home in a few hours. If they find out you aren't sleeping, I'll get in a lot of trouble for it. Don't tell your parents I said that. Come on, let's go down." "I'm telling the truth." "What is she, a vampire?" "You know, something was staring out the window earlier." I didn't really care about what I was saying because, in my head, everything had a logical explanation. Jason, however, widened his gaze. "Yeah, that could have been her." "Stop! I'm serious. And what does she want from us? Does she want to eat me?" We were now in his bedroom, and I had tucked him into bed. I had my back to the window facing the hallway, which had now become way crazier than expected. "She doesn't want to eat you. That's great. I taste horrible anyway. Good night." I tried to stand up and leave, but he grabbed me. "Wait, don't go. Look at me." "What now?" I asked. "I want to tell you about this dream I had. This dream that woke me up, but you have to pay attention." "Okay." So, in my dream, I was in a garden, and I was thirsty, and you were there too. You tried to leave, but there were a lot of bushes around, and you got lost. I found this puppet. I hated when people told me about their dreams, but I sat there listening, facing Jason with my back to the window, not because his story was interesting, but because while I listened, his eyes kept darting to the window and I could see the shadow cover his face. He insisted I look at him, but in reality, he didn't want me to turn around. So I listened until he abruptly finished the story when moonlight reached his face. "Thank you for the story. It was really interesting," I said. "You're welcome. Good night." "Night." I spent the next hour in the other bedroom, fidgeting with the little porcelain horse. This kid was a lot braver than I thought. In the silence, I kept trying to make out distinct unfamiliar sounds, but I didn't succeed. The house had fallen asleep and the night had become uneventful. His parents arrived soon after that. I put the horse in my pocket and went downstairs to greet them. "Was he good, Keith?" "Yeah, the best. Don't worry." I studied both of them from head to toe, their clothes, mannerisms, and facial expressions, but mostly the mom. "Were you good?" the dad joked. "I hope so," I responded. They wanted to drive me home, but I insisted on taking my bike. I closed the door behind me, but instead of leaving, I headed to the backyard. I just wanted to see something, so I climbed onto the fence and made it onto the roof of the porch, right next to the bedroom window, hoping to see some signs of something. Anything. The window was covered in scratches, but nothing indicated what had been there. I sat for a while, watching the garden from that angle, then the woods, as quiet as a mouse. Then I looked at the room where the parents were sleeping. After that, I don't remember how I got home. I don't even think I took my bike. I just ran frantically until my legs bled. I didn't scream. I didn't look around or stop. I just ran until I reached my house, banged on the door, and my mother answered, annoyed. I ran past her right to my bedroom, covered myself with a blanket, and started typing this. Because while I was watching the parents, something had caught my eye. In the hallway, what I thought was a coat hanger moved all of a sudden. It had been standing there so still, I hadn't even bothered to notice it until it disappeared from my sight and then appeared again. This phony, twisted silhouette dragged itself into the bedroom and stood right next to my mother, who was sleeping. It looked uncanny, like a human who'd starved to death, with wide eyes and arms so long they trailed behind it when it walked out. It just stood there watching my parents, then lifted a bony finger and started counting. I stood there, frozen, watching this horrifying show forever scarred in my head. It kept counting and counting and counting. I was so scared to move that I would have watched it forever. It wasn't until something else happened that made me break into an exhausting run.